It took me a few months, but then I fully realized that the technology I was dealing with was by far the most powerful thing that I ever worked on. With every feature that we're building, is there a way that AI makes it substantially better? I think in the education space, there really is this opportunity to bring equitable access to great teaching to every single person.
I am Claire Zhao, and I am on the investment team at GSV Ventures and wear many hats across both our summit as well as our investment team, particularly very focused on all things AI right now. So very excited here today to have with me the CEO of Kyron Learning, Rajen Sheth. Rajen, you have such an extensive background, and I feel like I would not do it justice if you could just kind of on a high level tell the audience here just about, your story, your extensive time at Google, your journey to Kyron. Would love a little intro to all of that.
Perfect. Yeah, happy to do so. Well, thank you for having me on this. I really appreciate it. And a little bit about myself. As you said, I'm the CEO of Kyron Learning. We're a 2-year-old company focused on how to deliver great AI experiences via video to students. And I'll tell you more about it in a bit. But then my background, I've been in the tech industry for a little bit over 25 years. Started off at Microsoft and went to a startup in VMware, but then spent the bulk of my career at Google for about 17 years. Led a lot of the education and enterprise efforts at Google, starting with Google Apps for Education and Google Apps for Enterprise, which is now known as Google Workspace. Moved to the Chrome team and led the Chrome efforts in education and enterprise. And then over my last 4 or 5 years there, led the AI product team for Google Cloud. And so kind of got a lot of different views at both education and enterprise. I left Google about 2.5 years ago, really with education in mind, really with the mission of education in mind. I really wanted to figure out how do we use some of this great technology that's emerging to bring equitable access to great teaching to more students. And I saw a clear gap there that so many students have access to great teachers and many students don't. And so how can we make it such that everybody has access to great teaching?
One of the reasons why we wanted to have a conversation with you specifically was that you just bring this wealth of experience from both, an incumbent in the space that is clearly pushing out a ton of new updates, and then also a great builder in the space that has had experience trying to build an AI product to sell to K-12 schools, but also in the broader education space. And it feels like the last couple of months have been really big for this reckoning moment for incumbents and startups to really go head to head. I think prior to the big GPT-4o release and the big Google Gemini or Google I/O developer day, there was a ton of startup activity. And then I think if you saw some of the tweets, and they're obviously a lot of them are very exaggerated in nature, just said that thousands of startups killed by Google and OpenAI in the span of 2 weeks. Curious how you've been thinking about all of those updates. What do they mean? What are some of the big technical capability advancements that you've observed, or even just generally, what trends are you observing from these big tech releases?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for a little bit of background, kind of the perspective we're looking at it is that we provide a platform for educators to create interactive videos that are powered by AI. And so this is a video where it's not just like a static video that you watch, it's a video that you actually talk to. So it feels like you're talking to a teacher and learning something from that teacher, as if that teacher were sitting with you. What's interesting there is that, there's a lot of advanced AI that's a part of it, but then there's also a strong understanding of the kinds of use cases where this can apply in K through 12, in higher ed, and professional skilling. And I think that has been my realization is that, AI is going to keep advancing. And there are some really amazing things that were released in May, but it's just going to keep getting better and better and better. And so we as a startup, I think part of what we really need to do and what other startups really need to do is figure out how are you using that to solve a specific problem as opposed to how are you just AI for the sake of AI. I think about that going back to my time at Google. When I led the AI team for Google Cloud, there were two parts of the organization. One was building out our AI platform, but another was we were building out solutions for particular industries. So, for example, financial services and healthcare and various others. What I found there was that, we could do a really good job of building a platform. We could do a somewhat good job of building solutions for particular industries. And the reason is that we were a platform player. And so what I also saw then is that there were startups that were using our technology that were much better at actually solving the needs of those particular industries, because that's all that they focused on. They found a particular pain point in a particular industry, and they would fill that need. And so what we actually shifted to was empowering those startups to be able to solve those needs using our platform. And I think that's where things are headed. I think what you can expect with the large AI players is that, AI is going to become more accurate. Yep. It's going to become faster, it's going to become cheaper, and it's going to become multimodal. It'll get to the point where you feel like you're interacting with a human when you're talking with one of these systems. That's kind of where it's going to go. What a lot of the providers are gonna struggle to do is filling every single problem perfectly well with their solution. And that's where I think the ecosystem is going to be critical. How can you take and ride the wave of that AI technology and ride on top of it by solving specific industry problems? I think that applies to education. There are so many different places where AI can be applied to help K through 12 organizations provide better intervention, help them bring students' achievement rates up, provide things like tutoring for students, or in higher ed, helping organizations improve enrollment or improve things like student completion rates. I think those are the cases where the creative minds in the industry that are focused on education can really differentiate.
Yeah. I want to double click a little bit on, just this difference between building a platform play versus something like a feature that just eventually gets commoditized. I think one thing I always think about was just how something like a Jasper, relatively overvalued and raised a ton of funding to build the next gen AI writing assistance play. And now you're seeing that as a feature, as part of everything from Apple Intelligence embedded in your phone to integrated within every single suite of Google Drive and all those Google apps. So in the education space, what do you see as the big differentiator between a platform play versus just building a feature, and how can you make sure that you're not in that bucket of just building a feature that later gets commoditized?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's honestly not a straightforward answer, because you kind of have to play the timeline forward a little bit and see, is this something that can get subsumed? Are you in the path of the LLM, or are you off to the side of it or on top of it? And I think that, you see a lot of things in education that are, basically things like content generation tools, for example, that can, that are things that you could theoretically go to, say, ChatGPT and go do, but they make it easier. I think that's a tough place to be, because the problem with that is that the AI systems are going to become better and easier to use, and also more familiar. Just like the search box became familiar for all of us, the question field for an AI assistant, or the way to interact with an AI assistant, is going to become more and more familiar. And so if you're just making it easier to interact with an AI assistant, that's a tough place to be, and that's something that can get commoditized over time. If you're using a variety of different types of AI to go solve a problem, and you're integrating in with the systems that people are using to do that right now, I think that's a much safer place to be. And the problem is it's not like a clear line between those. It's a bit of a fuzzy line between that. And so that's where you kind of have to prognosticate a little bit and play out, 5 years from now, what is an AI assistant going to look like, and how do you utilize that as opposed to get subsumed by it?
Yeah. I love the way you describe it as like steering away from the direct path of the LLM, and either being on side, on top. It's just an interesting way to characterize it. And I also think what you laid out just around ways to make sure that you're integrating, and I think I increasingly feel like solving for that cold start problem, that why would I go to your tool versus a ChatGPT, is exactly on clicking on that, where it has that context, it has that data on either learner or the institution or the end user, that makes it much more valuable and delivers on a faster time to value. Just to kind of double click on, I think you mentioned around just what AI assistants could look like in the future. I think GPT-4o, that release, as well as Google I/O, they both kind of gave us hints at what that could look like. I think especially around multimodality, you mentioned that earlier in the conversation, and just some features around, this big push towards AI agents. How are you thinking about that? What's kind of top of mind as it relates to those two big things that have seemed very important to, one of the two arguably most important organizations on the foundation model front?
Yeah, makes sense. And I do think that there's a layer below that is really critical, because I think what part of the problem right now is that the price point for AI exceeds what is palatable for a lot of use cases that are out there across many industries. And so making AI more accurate and less expensive, I think, is actually a bigger unlock to the ecosystem. And the providers, both OpenAI and Google, have done a really good job of that, as well as Anthropic. I do think that you're right. Probably the two biggest areas to look out for are multimodality, as well as trying to figure out how you can make AI do things for you, kind of the agent space. And so the things that I see that are happening there, I think, of course, AI is going to get better at being able to take in images and interpret that, or take in video content and things like that and interpret that, and then also vice versa, spit out images and video content. That second part, spitting out video and images and content, is actually arguably a harder problem, because you do see things like the Sora model, for example, that is really good at creating kind of very creative videos. But if you need to create an accurate video that explains something, it's a tougher thing to do through a video right now that's not manually created. And so I think that's going to be an area that you'll see lag a little bit behind. But I think the thing that you're going to see next, which you're seeing with some of these new releases, is taking in video. How do I take a picture in and dialogue around that picture? Those kinds of things, I think, are going to be very powerful going forward. The second thing around AI agents, I think, is really, really interesting. Particularly, one of the areas I think it's going to be really interesting in is customer service. So, how can you talk to a customer service agent that is using large language models that can do something for you, as opposed to just having a conversation with you and then having to defer you to something? The big giant benefit of that is that you can help people in a much more scalable way. Again, the tough thing there is accuracy. How do you make sure that, especially if you're taking an action, you're doing it accurately, and you're specializing your models to be able to do specific things very, very accurately? And so I think that's going to be the big challenge. And are people going to trust it to do something accurately automatically for them?
On the accuracy point, I think that's something that's been really close to the work that we do in the ed tech industry, because hallucinations, I think, when you're serving an adult population, an enterprise that has adults that know what hallucinations are, that's okay. But in industries like education or medicine, you can't have those kind of mistakes. So how are you all thinking about specializing those models? Have you built trust and safety into the DNA of Kyron?
Yeah, it's a really important thing for me, and really that comes from my time at Google. I think when I started with the AI group there in 2017, it took me a few months, but then I fully realized that the technology I was dealing with was by far the most powerful thing that I ever worked on. And as a result of that, the upside benefits are huge, but the downside is also huge as well. And so trust and safety and ethics are really crucial to this. The other thing to recognize is that AI, we're talking about probabilistic models. And so what that means is it is going to be inaccurate. in one way or another. So an example of this, you look at like image recognition models like the ImageNet winners that are out there. They're getting more and more and more and more accurate over the course of the last decade. But what you're seeing is that they are still in the 90-something% accuracy. So there's a percentage of time it's going to be inaccurate. So I think what you have to do is in the workflow, you have to plan for that. So in all of the industries I've worked in with AI, the solutions that have succeeded are those where there's a human in the loop, where there's an expert in the loop that can take a look at what the AI is outputting, and then is able to make a judgment with that. In our case, I think in the education industry, a lot of times the expert in the loop is the teacher. So how can you empower the teacher to bring things to their student that are vetted to a certain extent by that teacher? The other way to do it is to figure out how do you use AI kind of in limited ways that can be more accurate. So for example, one thing that we do is the way we generate a educational video for a student is that we'll take in from a teacher a set of learning objectives. We'll generate the video that has instruction parts to it, and then we'll ask a question to the student, and we'll have an answer that we're trying to lead them towards. The teacher can go in and actually change any of those things, but then we only use dynamically generated content with the student to lead them from a question to an answer that the educator has put in. And as a result of that, we can do a much better job of guardrailing it and much better job of making sure that things are accurate and it doesn't go completely off topic. So things like that, I think, are needed to put the right guardrails in place. Over time, these are going to get more and more and more accurate, but always you're going to have a potential that it's going to be inaccurate. So you have to really think about that as well. Last thing I'll say is I do think that users are going to start to understand that. Just like you understand that, when you look for when you do a Google search, you don't always click on the first link. You look through what you have and you make a judgment. I think we need to educate users on AI literacy to examine what's coming out and try to figure out is what's being said accurate or not.
As someone who's building in this AI era, you mentioned that costs are going down, compute is becoming much more readily available, and that's all trending in a really great direction. But as someone who's building in the space and it's fast, quickly moving, how are you thinking about allocation of resources as you build? How much of the time are you spending on AI versus AI innovation versus building the core product? I think curious to hear how you might have a different perspective if you were, someone who had a product pre-AI and is now building more AI tools integrating into it versus an AI native product.
Yeah, great question. And I go back to some of the ways that we were doing things at Google, even all the way back to 2015, which is we had a mantra of AI first at Google. And what that meant was not that every product is an AI product, but what that meant is that you should look at every feature and think, are there ways that AI makes this substantially better for the user? And that's the way that we're looking at it as well, which is, is there, with every feature that we're building, is there a way that AI makes it substantially better and we can make it easier for the user as a result of that? And I would encourage, companies even that have products that have been long in the industry, look at that because there's so much more you can do now as well. Another question that we're asking ourselves is where we see problems with AI being part of that, will this be a problem 6 to 9 months from now? And if it's not, then are there ways we just go with it and let the AI get better and better to the point where it works? I'll give you an example of this. We started without generative AI whatsoever, and because I didn't trust generative AI a year and a half ago to provide the right accurate answers, and so those were things that where we were. But then we start to realize we need to be developing 6 to 9 months ahead of the curve and be anticipating where it's going to go and kind of have the faith that it's going to get there.
Yeah. There's such a fine balance between, not missing out in the moment, but then also there's also merit in holding back in a time when you kind of let all the venture capital money flow down and let the foundation model providers do the innovating for you. You mentioned, building for 6 to 9 months in advance rather than building with what's out here now. What are some other ways you're thinking about defensibility as a startup?
I think the biggest way that we're thinking about defensibility goes back to really trying to figure out the problems that we're trying to solve. And AI is really a tool towards solving that problem. So we can think about where does AI play into that, but that's only one part of the solution. There's so many other parts of that. From a technology perspective, how do you integrate into the workflows that people have right now? What other user experiences you create that are magical for the user? And then how do you use AI to empower some of those things as opposed to AI being the product? The other part is on the rest of the company, the go-to-market, the specialization that you have. So for example, one thing that we've done is that we have a lot of educators on the team. Probably half of our team is educators. And so as a result of that, we're bringing a lot of the educational research and theory into this to make sure that we're operating in a way that meets the way that educators approach a student as opposed to how technology would approach a student. And so by building that into it, you can start to build defensibility that's not necessarily just there with a raw model.
For the people tuning in who haven't experienced a Kyron video, could you tell us a little bit more about what that experience is like and what that multimodality feels like?
Yeah, kind of what we try to make it feel like is like a conversation like this. That imagine if you were sitting down as a teacher with a student, what would you do? What you would probably do is you'll explain a little bit to the student, then you'll ask the student a question to be able to check for their understanding, and then go back and forth with the student to get them to that understanding, or have a discussion with the student, or test the student. That's what we do with Kyron. Our lessons feel like a conversation where the teacher explains a little bit and then asks a question to the student, and then they go back and forth towards getting to understanding. What that does for the student is that it's a lot more engaging, and we believe a lot more effective as well, because it gets them to where they need to get to. The other thing that we've done, and this is where generative AI has really come in hugely valuable, is that when we started building these videos, it was very hard to build. It took a lot of time for educators to go build it. We built something called Kyron Studio, where now you can go build one of these videos in less than 5 minutes. And we actually create the video for you. And what we'll do is then you can edit the video. You can edit how it teaches, you can edit what it says, you can put in your own videos, you can do a variety of things. But we make it such that within less than 5 minutes, you have a valuable teaching experience that you can send out to your students. And so that's really kind of taken us to really a next level.
I do want to touch on one conversation topic that has come up, just this idea that we're with that AI gold rush, that we are in a little bit of an AI bubble, and there's this discrepancy between all the massive investments that have come into the space. I think last year over half of investments in the venture space were all AI. You've been in the tech industry for a very long time, and so you've kind of witnessed these cycles with different technologies being introduced. But I do feel like AI is different. But yeah, just curious if you have any thoughts on that AI bubble thesis.
Yeah, and I definitely think that it follows very similar pattern to what you would see with the hype cycle for any other technology. I mean, if you think about it, like the internet, we started in 1993 with the browser and people being kind of fascinated with the internet, kind of like when ChatGPT came out. Then over the course of the next few years, everything was a .com. Like everything was converting to .com, even if it shouldn't have converted to a .com. And you came out with all these models of businesses that were just not sustainable, and you saw kind of a major shakeout. However, what you saw after that was that the internet grew and grew and grew and grew as people really kind of figured out what works and what didn't, and it became a dominant technology for just about everything that we do. Same thing happened with mobile. Same thing happened with social networks. Same thing is now happening with AI, and I've seen that with every technology that's come out as well. And so I think we're in a similar kind of position that There is a rush to have everything feel like AI. Every company is an AI company now. However, not every company should be an AI company, and AI is just one tool. And so, what I think we're going to see over the next couple of years is we're going to really start to see what kinds of use cases really make a difference and which ones don't. I think that over time, if you look at the next 10 years, AI is going to have a more transformative effect than the internet had. And I think we're on that path right now.
Yeah, yeah. I feel pretty aligned with everything you just laid out. I also think we're also seeing this kind of disconnect in maybe, everyone's been talking about in the enterprise space where CIOs have struggled to implement a lot of these kind of general assistance, co-pilot tools for work because it's one part technical change, but it's actually 9 parts change management. Or one of the last questions is just on K-12. How have you all been thinking about balancing introducing that technical change, but also selling a product that also involves behavior change?
It's something that is very tricky. And I'll tell you from all the experience I've had with AI over the last now 7 or 8 years, that's been the biggest problem. I like to tell this story about how we had this amazing model at Google that you could take a picture of a car that's been damaged and it'll assess the damage on that car to a pretty high degree of accuracy. It never saw the light of day, and part of the reason was that it was very tough to manage the change management within insurance companies that do this right now. And I think we're hitting a very similar kind of thing here with AI. That what you're seeing is that AI is advancing probably 5 or 10 times more quickly than any technology we've ever seen in terms of advancement. Industries are moving at probably half the speed that they typically do because there's a little bit of hesitation with this. There's hesitation about putting this in front of their users and what's the implication of that, as there should be. And so there's a discrepancy there. And that's something that I think we as an industry are gonna have to resolve. I think one of the ways to resolve it is kind of what you're saying, which is looking at what people are doing now and figuring out, can we use AI to make that faster, better, cheaper, without making massive changes to their workflow. We're in a tricky situation that we're asking for people to change their workflow. We're saying, like, let your students interact with AI. And so what we're trying to do is find the use cases where people are comfortable doing that and letting their students interact with AI and then showing the benefit. I think if you get it in the door and then show that it actually has a benefit, then more and more people will stop and think, hey, maybe this is something that we can do.
As we wrap up, what's most exciting to you in the next 3 to 5 year timeline? What are you watching out for broadly in either the education space or the AI space?
Yeah, I think there are probably a couple of things. I think in the education space, there really is this opportunity to bring equitable access to great teaching to every single person and do that in a way that extends amazing educators. I think we have a jewel out there with the incredible educators that are there.
Yeah.
How you can make it such that every student is able to benefit from that is something that is now within reach. And then on the AI side, I think you're going to see this get to the point. I think I'm excited about a couple of things there. One is, can you see this get to the point where it really does feel like you're naturally talking to a person? You're able to have a conversation and learn something from that conversation or find out information that you can trust. And then the other part is, can you do that ethically? And I think that putting the right frameworks such that people are able to trust the AI is going to be really crucial. And both need to happen at the same time in order for AI to really take off.
Yeah, that is an amazing point to end on. Yeah, this idea that I think you can, leverage AI, not necessarily to replace yourself, but like to extend yourself at scale and extend that teaching and learning of what makes your original teaching so great. Thank you so much, Rajen, for your time, for your wisdom and your insights.
Thank you, and thanks for all that you all are doing to really teach the industry about this.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this conversation. And if you're specifically building in the AI education space, please do reach out to me. I'm always looking to learn more about people at the forefront of this technology, and particularly those who are building innovative solutions for the education ecosystem. My email is claire@gsv.com. If you'd like to chat about all these topics live, feel free to come to our annual conferences. And finally, subscribe and follow to tune in for more GSV TV.